Hello everyone! So today we're going to take a look at a game in early access that's been in early access for quite a while, a few years actually, that goes by the name of CrossCode. And CrossCode is actually pretty special, as it turns out. And CrossCode is an RPG, a sort of isometric RPG, as you can probably tell, with a pretty neat story, some really fun combat, and a lot of elements of some other games that I've played that I'll probably be referring to a couple of times throughout this at least, and that you've definitely played as well. And it all comes together to form something really neat, and I'm choosing to cover it now mostly because it is nearing sort of its completion date. Its projected completion date by the devs is early 2018, is when they plan on being able to actually release the finished product. And that would not really surprise me, because so far their sort of projected update schedule and their other, bug fix and release dates and everything have been like spot on and completely reasonably paced and everything, and they have been able to meet pretty much everyone's expectations with what they've done. They haven't set themselves up for, screwing around too much or causing a bunch of trouble, which is always something good to look for with an early access release. Yay, level up! When the devs clearly have set themselves an actually reasonable and feasible schedule. I noticed that too. So that's, I guess, the first main thing to look at, is that yes, the schedule for this game does seem to be reasonable. And I make that distinction as pretty important because this game is actually quite ambitious for what it is. It's really pretty large. Even right now in its currently unfinished state, we're talking, if you do everything, like, all of the content that's currently available, we're talking like something around 40 to 50 hours of playtime you'll probably get. I mean, right now I'm at, gosh, what am I at? 16. I'm at 16 hours. So, yeah, the playtime is not lacking, even though the game is not finished. However, what is already here is what we're here to talk about right now. So, what exactly is CrossCode? Well, to start off, the story is something you've seen elements of before, but I've never quite seen it like this. And it's basically one of those, something like .hack, or, well, it reminds me very much of .hack, or Sword Art Online as well, which I've never actually watched, but I know what it's about, vaguely. And the idea of an MMO, players in an MMO, only the MMO is a bit more than that, and that the players control their characters in a way that is more than just sitting at a computer, and that it's a bit more real in one way or another. And in this case, it's, fairly literal. Your characters, your avatars, as they're called here, are controlled by actual humans in a kind of one-to-one ratio, a bit like Sword Art Online. However, oh god, you have to stand here and get it. However, they took it a bit farther in that it's not just an MMO world that you're controlling like this. It's actually that you're in real life as well. So your character's avatars are coexisting with humans in the real world, and the MMO itself is actually played on the real planet that you're on. It's actually a moon, sort of, in real life, with, humans and these avatar characters being on the same space, which is kind of an interesting concept. So it's a bit different than something like .hack or Sword Art or things like that, where it's, sort of one-to-one controlled characters in a virtual world. It's actually one-to-one controlled characters in the real world also. And they use that, I've noticed that CrossCode actually uses that idea to its advantage to kind of subvert certain gameplay tropes and other things, like the idea of, like the classic anime character that you can tell is obviously the protagonist, because they have like silly looking hair and are dressed in an odd way. Is that a liver? Next to human characters that look, normal and human in like a crowd. Well, in this game, it actually makes sense to see that, because you have this character with odd horned headpiece and blue hair, and some kind of normal human-looking character sometimes, because those are actually humans, and you are an avatar. So it makes sense for that kind of disparity to be, like, canon, and to be the case, instead of just being, like, silly costume design or something. So it's kind of neat that they actually kind of talk about that and use that to sort of subvert classic tropes that you see all the time. Because the opportunity was there, and I'm glad that they sort of took that from a story perspective. And the game constantly sort of talks about other common, I suppose, like MMO and game, and even sometimes like anime tropes and things like that, but not in a way that's kind of shoving it in your face, like references, but in I think a way that I kind of appreciate. Like, at one point you notice a chest, someone next to a chest, and they mention that the chests are instanced. So, you know, if you ever played an MMO, you know that means anyone can loot the chest for themselves, and it doesn't take it away from everyone else. And later on, you actually are part of like a story event in front of other players, and the NPC drops a chest for everyone to loot, and everyone does loot it. Everyone like walks up to the chest, and then you do it too, but it only disappears for you. And if you've ever played like an MMO with an instanced like story scene like that, that's exactly how it actually works. If you've ever done something like that, like Guild Wars. Which I like that little touch, because that's very much how it really does work, and it adds a lot of authenticity to the story scenes in this game, because it feels like you are playing through kind of an MMO. Which, again, brings me back to some of the other comparisons I made earlier, like .hack. This game actually feels a lot like playing .hack to me. I'm talking about like .hack Infection, like the original first one back on PS2, because that's actually the one I played the most of. And obviously, from a gameplay standpoint, it's a bit different. But from a story standpoint and some of the mechanics, it actually reminds me quite a bit of .hack. Like, for instance, you see I have a friend here who's helping me out and adventuring with me and commenting on some of the monster design and stuff, which is another aspect that I like. Your party members and stuff will actually comment on monster and boss design and some other aspects of the game as if it were a game, because it is. Only not in a way that's like grating or annoying, but in a way that's actually kind of funny. And you'll see that the way that, actually I can show you because I have a menu, it's done from the social menu, which is very much like the way .hack did things. You go and you have your friends, as well as some contacts of various people you've met that you can talk to get like tips and other things like that. Holy crap, it's level 75. Good lord. Or you can go over here and talk to your actual party members and see what they're equipped with, and if they're online, sometimes they'll be offline to do like, you know, real life stuff, because real life sucks. And you can like just invite them to your party and have them adventure with you and help you out if you want to, or you can go solo and things like that, which is exactly the way that .hack did, basically. Which is a welcome little addition to the game, because being able to form a party of multiple people, you can get all three of these people that I have right now in on it. The other character, she is currently not online for story reasons. And you are exploring this world, so let's talk about the world now. The world is actually very, very large. And quite varied. As you can probably tell by using your eyeballs, I'm in a desert area right now, and the desert area has the kind of stuff that you would generally expect from deserts, but I've noticed that the game deliberately subverts some of that stuff by, that was very smart, by kind of making some of the enemies a bit silly on purpose. Like, you'll notice instead of like sand worms all the time, you'll fight like sand sharks that can swim in the sand and things of that nature, which is, I mean, alright, I'm fine with that. And these scorpions have 4 legs and like mechanical poison pincers, and that one appears to have an eye patch, because it's a scorpion with an eye patch. And yeah, that is the case for every sort of kind of enemy in every one of the locations. They sort of, again, like I said earlier, sort of subvert a lot of your expectations a bit and make the design a bit silly. In the ice area, you do fight penguins on a mountain, which is important to know. This game does have mountain penguins. You also fight bionic goats, which are huge jerks, by the way. They are like the worst enemies. And some other silly things. And yeah, the list goes on and on with some of the pretty creative enemies and I like the design. And if you want, you can also look up the boss designs and things like that. The bosses are pretty crazy. You'll find many bosses and bosses in the various temples, the big dungeons that you have to go through. And they're very well designed. And very multi-stage boss battles. One thing I really like about the game is that the boss health gauges actually denote what stage of the boss battle you're on. I don't know why I like it when games do that, but I really like that. They actually are segmented and deliberately show you what part of the fight you're on, so that you know when the boss is going to transition to a new phase. Important, because some of the phases can actually be pretty hard. And the overall, like, aesthetic of the boss design is pretty amazing. The latest big, huge boss that I actually fought was quite something. I want to get that chest. I want to get it. I want to open it. And I want to get it. So how about the combat? Well, the combat is actually really fun. So it is, as you can probably tell, both melee and ranged based. Both are viable, and you can build for both. You have a multi-hit combo here that ends in a pretty powerful knockback attack, but it has a bit of a delay, as you can see, before you can move or attack again. You also have a ranged attack, and if you don't fire for a minute, it will charge up and fire this bouncing projectile. The projectile is quite potent, and it can knock back enemies and cause them to go into this break state, which is a sort of stun. And also this is completely required for lots of puzzle solving, which we'll get to later. Although you saw a little bit of it a minute ago. You can also just hold the button to fire a storm of weaker projectiles. You also have this dash for dashing, and you can tri-dash. That is the maximum number of dashes you can string together. If you try and do it more than that, you just do this instead, which doesn't really work. And you can dash cancel the delay in that last attack there, like this, to continue attacking very, very quickly and pile on the damage heavily, which is very satisfying to do. You also have elemental powers, because you are an avatar, of course, so you must master all 4 of those. And after going through the main dungeons, you will obtain, near the end, an elemental power. And the coolest thing about these is, and this is something that I love it when games like this do, the elements are tied into both puzzle solving and combat. So if I wanted to, and there's a break state there, all I gotta do is switch over. They are mapped to your up, down, left, and right D-pad on the controller. And I am now in heat mode, so my attacks are now fire elemental. Even my ranged attacks, I now toss fireballs, which is pretty swell. And I also have special attacks that I can only use in this mode, aside from just my normal attacks being fire-based. Although, as you can see there, it's building up a meter in the top left, and if I max it all the way out by just spamming attacks, this happens. Elemental overload, and you are forced back for a minute to your neutral stance, which means you basically can't use it forever. If you use it too much without switching back, you will overload your elemental circuit, basically, and not be able to use it anymore. It also changes your stats, you may notice. It shows my stats up there, and if I just switch back and forth really quick for a minute, you'll see that they actually change. And I'll explain that in just a second, but I want to pile on the smackdown with these guys real quick. You also have combat arts, as demonstrated, which are very powerful attacks that you use the SP meter up there for. And SP is gained by just beating the crap out of things, mostly, and your level 1 combat arts are pretty potent, but you also have level 2 combat arts that need to be charged and require 3 bars of SP instead of 1. So, I should explain now the circuit system and how all this works. This is pretty cool. When you level up, as well as your stats going up, you get cross points, which you put into the circuit grid. And the main one that you'll start with is this one. It's your skill tree, essentially. And this allows you to unlock new arts, which you have for dashing, for guarding, for shooting, range attacks, and for melee combat. So there's an art for like every type of thing you can do, basically, which is really neat. And there are 2 for each, and you can switch between them, which is actually really neat. You can only have one active at a time because it uses the same button, but you can switch between them whenever you want. So right now I have Sphere Saw activated, and I really want to get Sphere Storm, and now that I have 2 points, I'm actually going to do that. Yes. So this is, I mean, it's a bit like a sphere grid, honestly, but it's used to do all kinds of things like this. For instance, item booster, very useful, because the items are percentage based and how much health they restore. So boosting that is very useful. And you have just all kinds of useful effects here, aside from just base stat increases like elemental resistances and things of that nature. However, you also have a circuit for every elemental power that you can unlock, which is honestly a lot of... That's a lot. That's a huge amount of, like, skill tree goodness, and once you have all 4 of the elements, this thing is going to be massive. And the points you gain, as you can tell down there in the bottom left, are actually separate. So the neutral points that you gain for leveling up and you spend don't affect the points that you have to spend for the flaming tree, or heat tree, and so on for all the others. Heat tree, that sounds strange. And so that allows you to spend the maximum amount of points in each, and that's because the points that you spend in these trees are only active when that mode is active. So I have a bunch of like max HP and damage increases, but these are only active when I'm actually in heat mode. So that's something to consider. And this is the case for all of the elemental abilities. Let's see. I've been using this a lot, which is really useful. And I would like to get to this so I can use it more often. I have enough to do that, so we'll get more focus, which is like more SP gain, more crit chance, and things like that, and then use balance, so I'll be able to use it a little bit longer without overheating. There we go. Very nice. Awesome. Also, as you could, whoops, that'd be the wrong button. There's also a pretty good inventory system of, gaining items of various rarities and putting them on you to use. I have way too many weapons. I need to sell some of this stuff. And I should also say those modifiers are a very interesting part. So you have modifiers that are attached to various pieces of equipment, and they do all kinds of things. They're actually a bit like skills from Monster Hunter, and they, as you can see here, can cause just all sorts of different things. Increased movement speed while aiming. Actually, I've decreased because it's in the negative right now. That gives me more credits from defeating enemies, which I have from one of the weapons I'm using. No, it's actually from the Thief's Band, that's right. Bolt caliber, knockback from charge shots, just all sorts of passive effects from various pieces of equipment, which actually makes them really neat, honestly. It adds a lot of flavor to each of them. And that will bring me to, let's see, what else we need to talk about. The puzzle solving is great. The temples, the actual dungeons, are very much like Zelda dungeons. Very much like Zelda dungeons. They feel, honestly, when I'm in one of those, I get a pretty huge Link to the Past vibes. Or Minish Cap, I guess, but really Link to the Past mostly. There's a huge amount of puzzle solving in each one. They're kind of focused like 75% puzzle, 25% combat, and some combat puzzle. And they mostly revolve around clearing various rooms using different kinds of like bouncing projectile puzzle, block pushing puzzles, and even elemental puzzles of various kinds that change with each dungeon because you will have different elements for each one. So that's pretty neat, honestly, and they are quite effective because they keep you interested pretty much the whole way through, at least they do me. And then you'll also generally have some like side quests to do while you're in there, of stuff to find and enemies to beat and materials to get, and maybe some side little puzzles to complete for extra loot, chests that you can't get up to unless you complete a puzzle in a specific way, like a second time around or something like that, which is common in Zelda games as well. It all just feels very polished and very good. The world itself, I should show you, you've got a fast travel system to go through various points in the world when you find these teleporters here, which is what these blue thingies represent. And you also have a world map, and as you can see, the world's actually really significantly large, and I'm guessing the other part of the game is probably over here. It's not there yet. So you've got a you've got a lot here. And in fact, let me just show you this place because it's genuinely quite beautiful. This is a desert city with a bazaar and everything in it. And this is one of the hub areas, and this will give me a chance to show you the trading system because it's actually a bit different. There are two types of shops in this game. The first of which is, I mean, you probably noticed that I am dropping credits occasionally. Enemies give me credits. And the first is that you just go into a shop and you put what you want in your cart and you pay credits for it and you leave and you have it because you paid credits for it. And that's, a very easy to understand concept, but that's actually the minority of how these shops work. Most of them do not actually work that way. Most of them work on a trade system. And all these things that I'm picking up right now, from killing enemies and destroying all these various types of plant life, like a horrible person, are actually trade items. And various, like, bazaars and markets and things will be open all over the place, and they will accept a combination of credits and different amounts of these items to give you something. So, like that, yes, that is a reference. And up here you'll see this is like a marketplace with a huge number of these traders. So if I just walk up to one, it'll show you what they have in their inventory. And each of these things will take a different number of different materials and some credits in order for you to get it. And this is where you get most of the stuff in terms of shops, rather than just buying it straight for credits. So if I was to go here, you see it gives me a list of what all he wants for it, what he's offering and what he needs. And you just gotta find all those things, have the requisite amount of credits, and pay up, and there you go. I like this trading system. I think it's pretty cool. And there's also things like these, where these are trade items that you have to pay, you have to get, like, base resources for. You get these, and then you take them to trade for other items. So there are some of these, especially like these, the junk and refined metal, for instance. I mean, you can even see right there that this actually takes junk metal. That they're basically trade items that you trade for first. So it's like a supply line kind of thing where you need some of the other bazaar items before you can get even better ones, which is neat. And there are very rare ones in out-of-the-way places and things like that. And yeah, it's a pretty cool little system. I like the way it works. It feels a bit like in like the bazaars in Final Fantasy XI almost, with people wanting to trade with each other. So, what do I think of CrossCode so far? Well, it's a game that just makes me happy to play, honestly. It just feels great to actually play through, because it reminds me of like my first times playing games like Final Fantasy XI with all the people running around. Even though, of course, this isn't a real MMO, it is very much reminiscent of one on purpose, and it does it in a convincing way with other players, or players with air quotes, running around and being strange and trading things and talking about the various game mechanics that they find interesting, or various enemy designs they think are weird, or how that last boss fight was really hard, and in a convincing and interesting way. It reminds me of playing games like .hack and how much I liked that, and it reminds me of playing Zelda back in the day and the satisfaction of solving some of those puzzles and those temples and getting through them and going on to the next area. The story is presented in a really interesting way. The story is pretty cool so far. I'm not going to spoil any of it, of course. I do not want to do that. And a lot of the characters, also the characters that you can travel around with, are pretty interesting in and of themselves. And you discover more and more about them as you travel with them, and they have good personalities of their own and a story of their own that you can learn. It's a really good game, and it is something that I've found myself coming back to quite often to enjoy, and I'm really excited for them to finish it. And of course, something that's this story-based, I don't blame people at all for not wanting to buy it yet, because they don't want to play it until it is definitely done. And I couldn't blame people for that at all. That's super powerful. But if you are interested, the game is $20, and that seems really fair, especially if you like try and do everything there is to do. Even right now, you're still gonna get like about 40 hours probably, which is, I mean, for $20, that seems you know, fair to me. And even if you don't have the full story to finish right now, you can still get pretty far, and as far as I know, they're not wiping your progress or anything like that when the full game is going to be released. And in fact, some of the reasons that what isn't here yet, even though the game is actually quite nearing its content complete state, I mean, it's version 9.5, you know, that's really up there, that's almost done, is because they want to release the rest of the story all at once instead of kind of trickling it and having people finish some of the story too quickly, you know? So they're trying to get to a point where basically the rest of the main content is done and they can do it all at once, instead of having people waiting for little bits and pieces to be like drip fed, essentially, because that's just not a good way to do it, and they're aware of that, so that's not how they're going to do it. And I very much respect that method of distributing updates. Their updates have been regular and on the schedule that they've set, about every 2 months for major updates. Last one was in early July, and up to this point, it's been going really, really well. The game is stellar. It plays excellently, the combat is very enjoyable, the puzzling is awesome, the soundtrack is great, and the story is interesting. So this is CrossCode. It's something in early access that doesn't come around very often, and it's something that I definitely have to recommend that you check out if you're at all interested in RPGs or Zelda games or just fun. Check it out, because I don't think you'll be disappointed. And I'll of course link you in the description below this video to the Steam store page, and you can have a look. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.